Okay, episode 4. Apparently, we need to talk about resumes. Because somewhere along the way, this conversation went from what does USEF need from its next CEO to people literally creating LinkedIn accounts to investigate my employment history. Yeah, so fine. Here we go. Let's talk about it. But this isn't going to be 10 minutes of me explaining why I should get a job. I actually think the more interesting conversation is what kind of experience matters for this job at all. So, since I've been pretty vocal about what I think USEF should be doing differently, I'll also give you some context about where my perspective comes from. So, let's start with where the search stands. USEF hired Korn Ferry to conduct the CEO search. The USEF board ultimately makes the hiring decision, while Korn Ferry is there to help run a professional executive search process and evaluate candidates. So, yes, I have applied and I participated in that process. That's really all I'm gonna say about my own status while the search is active. What is interesting is the bigger question. What should USEF actually be looking for? Because this isn't simply a horse job, and that brings me to, what does qualified mean? USEF is a national governing body overseeing a really complicated ecosystem. You've got Olympic and Paralympic sport, national competition affiliates, licensed competitions, governance, safe sport, horse welfare, drugs, medications, membership, technology, finance, sponsorship, and media. And you've got completely different disciplines and stakeholders who don't necessarily want the same things. That's a complicated organization to lead. So I don't think being a great trainer automatically makes someone qualified to be CEO. I also don't think you grab a generic corporate executive who has never stood at an end gate and assume they're gonna understand the economics and culture of this industry. There has to be some balance. I mean, finance matters, strategy matters, operations matter, technology matters, governance matters, communications matter. But understanding the actual sport matters too. And that's partly why I've been so interested in this conversation. Which brings me to my perspective and where it comes from. Because since apparently we have to investigate my resume now, here's the condensed version. I graduated from Roanoke College with a BBA in finance. My coursework was heavily finance, economics, accounting, and business. I participated in the Federal Reserve Challenge, which is basically taking economic data, interest rates, inflation, employment, monetary policy, and building and defending an economic position from it. And looking back, that explains a lot about how I approach problems. Give me a complicated system with a bunch of interconnected variables, and apparently I'm gonna start pulling it apart. I was also the treasurer and philanthropy chair for FIMU. Yeah, rack 'em up, stack 'em up, and did leadership education through the Disney Institute. And then I went into federal consulting. I worked on Army's iPerms program, including the iPerms 2.0 rollout, in a CMMI level 3 environment. And for anyone who doesn't speak project management nerd, CMMI is really about process maturity and having documented processes, managing risk, measuring performance, and creating accountability instead of just putting out fires. I also worked around federal technology and security environments, including the Foreign Affairs Network, and previously held a security clearance. My career then moved through larger corporate environments beyond just federal consulting, including Humana, with work across senior program and project management, technology, operations, strategy, and enterprise transformation. And that's probably the piece that most influences the way I talk about USEF, because enterprise work teaches you that nothing happens independently. Technology changes something for operations. Operations affects finance. Finance affects strategy. And legal sees risk. The customer has a completely different priority. And they usually all span. And somehow, of those people have to move roughly in the same direction. So when I talk about USEF's technology or governance or membership model, that's the lens I'm using. It doesn't mean I'm automatically right. Explains why I'm asking the questions I'm asking. And then it brings me to, then there's the horse side of my resume. And basically I have completely two separate resumes at this point. I'm a third generation in the sport. I've been riding since I was a kid. I grew up primarily in hunters, equitation, and jumpers. I competed as a junior and an amateur, owned horses, dealt with injuries and rehabs, and experienced the sport from the participant side for most of my life. And now I'm experiencing another side of it. I'm a horse show parent, or trying to be at this rate, and that one has actually changed my perspective quite a bit. Because now I'm not just thinking about whether I want to participate. I'm looking at what this sport is going to look like for kids coming into it. What's it going to cost? How accessible is it? I mean, are we creating lifelong participants? Are we making the sport understandable to people who aren't already inside the bubble? And how do we make sure there is actually a next generation? Those are questions I think every discipline should be asking. And that's really the point. My background isn't a template for who should become a CEO. I'm along for the ride. There are going to be different ways someone could be qualified for this job. Someone might bring much deeper nonprofit leadership. Someone might bring international sport experience. Someone might have a huge commercial growth background. Someone else might have spent decades running complex membership organizations. That's exactly why you hire an executive search firm. The interesting part isn't finding 5 people with identical resumes. It's figuring out which experiences matter most for where USEF needs to go next. And I hope that's what this search ultimately comes down to. not who has the biggest name, not who has been around horse shows the longest, and not who has the fanciest corporate title. What problems does USEF need to solve over the next 5 or 10 years? And what kind of leadership is best equipped to solve them? Because LA 28 is coming, technology is changing, media is changing, the economics of participation are changing, and the expectations of members are changing. So yes, that's my resume. Now everyone can stop making LinkedIn accounts. But hopefully the more interesting takeaway isn't whether my resume checks some imaginary set boxes. It's that we should probably be having a much bigger conversation about what boxes actually need to be checked in the first place. And that's a conversation worth having. So I'm Ellie Morris, and this is Let's Talk About It. Bye.